This chapter is called You Are Not a Pen. And it's the 15th chapter. The morning sun, rising over the nearby Himalayas, streamed through the window onto my new guru, Swamiji's face. We were sitting in his office across the desk from each other. Each time he raised his eyes from the papers and looked at me, the light was breathtaking. His eyes, always a dance of light, now reflected the sun's rays as mirrors. My heart stopped each time his eyes met mine. "Write to Dr. Rao in Colombia," he said, referring to the chief editor of the Encyclopedia of Hinduism. "Get a new latest chart of how many articles are still left to be assigned and how many are left to be received out of those that have been assigned already. Tell him I want to know the status." My pad was about half used. I'd been in Rishikesh nearly 2 months, and every few days I was called into Pujya Swamiji's room to receive more work. He had found an eager and competent typist. And I'd found something to do, a way to serve, to give back to this man in this place. My seva, a Sanskrit word meaning selfless service, consisted mostly of letters to write. It was simple correspondence. Swamiji would open a file full of letters he'd received and his own handwritten notes in Hindi. Flipping through the papers one by one, he instructed me what to say. 60 days ago, I had been taking final exams in advanced psychodynamic psychology, the biological basis of behavior and neurological assessment. I researched and wrote papers on psychopathology and psychodiagnosis. That too had already begun to bore me. How many more hoops do I have to jump through before I can actually start helping someone? I groaned at my neurology advisor, my parents, my friends, and anyone else who would listen. Now I spent hours a day typing on a pale blue manual typewriter, the kind I'd never actually seen except in movies, with huge keys that bounced up and down. Finger yoga, with no delete button. Mistakes had to be painted with liquid paper and typed over once the liquid had dried. The work was mostly typing short letters to devotees around the world. Blessings on weddings, birthdays, anniversaries, all with the essential question of, "When are you coming home to Rishikesh?" And the invitation, "The holy waters of Mother Ganga and the sacred Himalayas are calling you." Pujya Swamiji's arms and heart were open to all. The call was universal. Come home to Rishikesh. Recharge your batteries in this sacred land. Most of the correspondence was follow-up on projects, mostly the Encyclopedia of Hinduism, which was being overseen by K.L. Sheshagiri Rao, the editor, and his team at the University of South Carolina in Columbia, with satellite offices in Bangalore, Madras, now Chennai, Delhi, Nagpur, Benares, now Varanasi, and London. The irony of trading research into serotonin reuptake disruption for birthday blessings was lost on me. Neurologic and psychodynamic papers and studies felt meaningless, while ghostwriting blessings was exhilarating. I was too intoxicated to notice the paradox. On this autumn morning, I finally bought a pair of socks. Chill had begun to creep into the blue skies, and the marbled floor in my room at 4 a.m. reminded me of a favorite poem by Judith Viorst titled "Thoughts on Getting Out of a Nice Warm Bed in an Ice-Cold House to Go to the Bathroom at 3 o'clock in the Morning." Maybe life was better when I used to be a wetter. So I purchased a pair of synthetic brown socks that had a space for my big toe and larger one for the remaining toes to facilitate wearing them with flip-flops. When I returned home from shopping, Surya, Swamiji's main attendant, came to my room. walking in without knocking, as always, and announced, "Pujya Swamiji is calling you." So here we sat across from each other at his dark, glass-covered desk while I watched the light streaming through the window into his eyes. He read each paper quickly, then either placed it back in the file for work for another day, or removed it and began to dictate instructions. I scribbled on my makeshift pad, made by stapling together papers with writing on one side. Without a recycling infrastructure, the only environmentally friendly way to live in India is to reduce and reuse. Nothing is wasted. Every paper that arrives in the ashram, from envelopes to wedding invitations and everything in between, is reused. My pad had been created, like so many others, by cutting used paper in half, then stapling the sheets into a pad. I scribbled his dictation. Follow up with Dr. Rao, birthday blessings, replies to letters requesting Swamiji's presence at functions he would not be able to attend, knowing they were all props in the drama of why I was here. I made brief notes of people's names and crucial points. The language and the rest I would compose on my own. Really, what I wanted to do was just stare at the light streaming from Swamiji's eyes on the glass tabletop. He did not notice me doing this, as it looked as if I was gazing at the table, on which rested my pad and his file. I took just enough notes to ensure that I could complete the tasks and would be permitted to keep sitting there. The light reflected and refracted off the glass table into my own eyes, causing them to tear. Were the streams of water running down my face physical reactions to the light in my eyes, or was I crying? Where did the outer end and the inner begin? It didn't matter. Nothing mattered except sitting there as the sun rose gently over the Himalayas, pouring more incandescent rays onto his face and into my body, which was quickly dissolving into the chair on which I sat. Suddenly, Swamiji looked up from the file, held his pen in the air and said to me, "You are not this pen." I laughed. Was he really saying this, or was I imagining it? Pulled out of my dreamy journey of the rays of light, I realized he was saying something quite deliberate. "You are not this pen," he repeated. Although I could see he was serious, I laughed again. Of course I was not the pen. Had I melted my brain cells staring into the bright light? Was I unable to grasp the meaning of his statement? There were certainly many things about the world I did not know, but that I was not a pen wasn't one of them. Why was he saying this? "Yes, Swamiji," I said, trying to restrain my giggles at the absurdity of his statement. "I am not that pen." He didn't laugh, and his eyes no longer reflected the sun's rays, but generated a light of their own that seared straight into my chest and made my heart stop. "You laugh," he said, "because you know that you are not this pen, but you still think you are that body. You think that you are all the experiences it is having, all of its beauty, intelligence, emotions, pleasures, and pains. You still think that it is you." My breath disappeared. I couldn't speak. "Someday," he continued, "you will laugh in the same way when I say you are not that body." His eyes broke their hold on mine and returned to the file. "Now, Agai Baro, let's keep moving." "Next," he said, as he picked up a Hallmark card covered in hearts and flowers with the rounded, bubbly handwriting of a young girl. "Now write, 'My dear divine Cuckoo, I have received your beautiful card.'" "I am not this body." "Okay, that makes sense. I've had experiences of being out of my body before, not being the skin and bones of my physical frame, of melting and merging into the world around me. I had whirled and twirled on LSD at Grateful Dead concerts and merged into the tall grasses, sandy beaches, and warm afternoon sun of the Mendocino coast as Jim, some friends, and I spent a Saturday eating psychedelic mushrooms. Over these months in Rishikesh, unassisted by chemicals or plants, I had experienced nearly continuous expansions of consciousness beyond not only my body, but also the walls, doors, and rooms in which I sat or lay. I understand I am not the body, but not the experiences? Not what had happened and was continuing to happen? Not my emotions and the identity that generates them? In the 3 or 4 meetings of the 12-step group for eating disorders that I'd attended, the first thing we said was, "Hi, my name is such and such. I am bulimic, or I am anorexic, or etc., etc." This was the non-negotiable opening line. In group therapy, we began by sharing, "I am an abuse survivor." What I felt, thought, struggled with, reacted to, longed for, I had been told was due to these aspects of my history and identity. The depression and anxiety, the recovery from depression and anxiety, the recovery from the bulimia, the ability to forgive. Surely all of this was who I am. They were and are all inherent parts of me. How could I not be what I felt, knew, and experienced? If I'm not those things, then who am I? Each night, as the arti lamps are placed in a neat line along the bottom step above the flowing waters of Ganga, at the conclusion of the ceremony, as the blazing ghee-soaked wicks burn themselves out and thick plumes of camphor rise in the wind, we chant this mantra from the Upanishads. Purnam adaha, Bhurnam idam, Bhurnat Purnam adachyate, Bhurnasya Bhurnam adaya Purnam eva vasishyate. I had memorized these words before I knew what any of them meant. In time, I learned that this fundamental teaching of Indian philosophy says that the creator, the source, the origin, is full, complete, and infinite. This, which has come out of that, which has been created from that, removed from that, is also whole, complete, and infinite in itself. This mantra is the spiritual equivalent of the mathematical properties of infinity. Infinity minus 10 is still infinity. Infinity divided by 10 is still infinity. Infinity divided by 7.7 billion is still infinity. I found it difficult to concentrate on the paper Swamiji was handing me, and didn't leave much room for the instructions about correspondence. Fortunately, a few minutes later, one of the boys came in to tell him that the people he was to see at 12:30 p.m. were waiting in his garden. "Okay, that's enough for now," he said, and walked out the door. I went to lunch and pondered the infinite nature of round chapatis. Thank you for listening. That is the end of the 15th chapter. You are not this pen. We will continue reading The Hollywood to the Himalayas next time.